This story is about a man who survives a deadly accident thanks to an alien nanofluid, one never meant for human biology. The emergency klaxons screamed through the alloyed walls of Research Outpost Atraxis 7, a sterile cube embedded into the arid crust of a lifeless moon orbiting Gentar 4. Red strobes flared through smoke-clouded corridors as disoriented scientists scrambled over toppled equipment. Through the chaos, a body lay motionless, near the shattered edge of Lab Sector 12, half buried in debris. Dr. Kaylin Vorel, a senior viral synthetic biologist, gripped the console edge for balance as seismic tremors died out. "Confirm life signs," he ordered, voice taut, appendages twitching with residual panic. An assistant, a slim, cerulean-skinned mirror named Halik, fumbled with a biometric scanner, rushing over the rubble. The screen blinked violently red. Human. Alive, but vitals crashing. Who? Kaylin squinted into the drifting dust. Then recognition hit him like an electric jolt. Ah, that's Mark. Mark Ellison, one of the few Terran liaisons permitted on Atraxis 7, had been assisting with cross-species tissue compatibility protocols. Now, his torso was caved in, his breathing irregular and wet. Blood pooled beneath his side, viscous and dark. One leg was twisted grotesquely, the femur clearly broken beneath skin. "Get him to Biolab 3, Kaylin snapped. "Halleck, override the lift lockdown." "No medevac possible. External hangars sealed," Halleck responded. "Outposts in lockdown until tectonic subsides stabilize." The alien team converged, carefully lifting Mark onto a lev pad. Flesh tore audibly as metal shards shifted in his abdomen. He didn't scream, only exhaled a low, gurgling moan before slipping under again. The room was lit with surgical white. Mark's body lay slack on the stabilizer cradle, surrounded by humming machines and diagnostic arms. His oxygenation was dropping by the second, internal bleeding unchecked. Conventional trauma stabilizers couldn't compensate. His organs were starting to fail. Kaylin reviewed the data. Even with full nanostent insertion and cardiac resync, he won't make it. Too much damage. Halleck's voice was hesitant. "There is another option. The prototype. The nanofluid?" Kaylin turned sharply. "No. That's for synthetic dermal regeneration only. Mark is organic. The nanofluid hasn't even been approved for similoid testing yet. He'll die in minutes, sir." They looked at the monitors. His blood pressure had flatlined twice in the last minute. Alarms blared a chorus of clinical despair. "Do it," Kaylin finally said. The nanofluid was stored in a cryosealed cylinder, opaque and cold to the touch. Halleck loaded it into the injection port while another medic evacuated the remnants of Mark's blood through arterial drains. The outpost machines weren't built for full transfusion, and the tubing rattled as foreign systems tried to accommodate the human's alien biology. With a final authorization command, the fluid surged through his system. At first, nothing. The room held its breath. Then Mark convulsed. His back arched off the cradle as the nanofluid sparked through him like a live wire. Readings went wild, neural spikes, cardiac surges, metabolic chaos. The cradle attempted to sedate him, but his brain activity only accelerated. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then silence. Vital signs stabilized, his oxygenation normalized, his heartbeat regulated to a steady 68 BPM. The scans showed a startling phenomenon. Tissue was regrowing. Damaged lung tissue was sealing in real time. Shattered ribs began to reconnect, and the femur, splintered into 3 clean breaks, was knitting back together with unnatural speed. Not in days, not in hours, but right before their eyes. Kaylin leaned over. "That shouldn't be possible." "He's healing," whispered Halleck, awestruck. "But the nanofluid was never meant to integrate with organic tissue. It's supposed to mend carbon-weaved synthetics. This is rewriting his biological code." The rest of the medics gathered around the cradle. One recorded with a data lens. Another began live transmitting the biofeed to central records. Mark stirred. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. He grimaced, tried to sit, then cried out and collapsed. "Everything hurts," he rasped. His voice was hoarse, but there was a spark of lucidity that hadn't been there before. "You should be unconscious," Kalen said gently. "Don't move. You're stabilizing remarkably." "What happened?" Mark blinked. "Where? Lab exploded?" There was a quake. "You were caught in the collapse. You suffered multiple fractures, hemorrhaging, organ trauma." Mark squinted at the medical gear. "Why am I not dead?" Kalen hesitated. "We replaced your blood with an experimental fluid. It wasn't meant for your kind, but it saved your life." Mark looked down at his arm, translucent tubing still embedded in the crook of his elbow. The fluid inside shimmered faintly, like mercury under moonlight. "Am I okay?" he asked. "No, you're alive. That's different. We're still trying to understand what's happening." Over the next hours, the outpost became a quiet frenzy of data gathering. Mark's healing progressed with impossible momentum. By the third hour, his ribs had fully calcified into proper alignment. The deep abdominal lacerations were closing as if undone by invisible hands, and his broken leg, once a jigsaw of bone fragments, had reformed with an accuracy unmatched by any surgical tech. Still, the human wasn't spared the pain. The regeneration came with waves of fever, disorientation, and racking agony. "I can feel everything," he groaned at one point, drenched in sweat. "It's like fire under my skin." Callan gave a low hum, translating to thoughtful concern. "It's possible your pain receptors are being overstimulated. The fluid repairs damage faster than your nerves can recalibrate." "Yeah, well, they're working just fine," Mark muttered through clenched teeth. By the 8th hour, the team noticed something even stranger. Mark had nicked his hand against a sharp tool when trying to sit up. The cut bled for all of 5 seconds before sealing itself completely. A faint silvery sheen covered the site for a moment, then vanished. Kalen didn't speak. He scanned the data again. He's healing faster than he can be hurt. That evening, the outpost held an emergency symposium. Scientists from every major field weighed in, projecting simulations, modeling molecular responses. The nanofluid had fully integrated into his circulatory system and was replicating autonomously. It had begun rewriting his cellular repair protocols, seemingly aligning itself with the human genome in real time, but only his. A Falgari medic volunteered to test a minor application of the fluid on their own tissue. No result. Another tried introducing it to a murine cell culture. It dissolved harmlessly. Even hybridized samples failed to react. Only Mark's body accepted the nanofluid, and not passively. It had adapted to him. Kalen voiced what many were thinking. He's not just recovering. He's evolving into something new. Mark, meanwhile, was struggling with simpler thoughts, like how to get to the bathroom without a medical escort, or whether he'd ever feel normal again. "Nothing's where it used to be," he murmured one night, trying to scratch his arm where synthetic filaments had formed under his skin. "It feels like someone rearranged me while I wasn't looking." "You are, in a sense, no longer entirely human," Kalen said softly. "But you may be the beginning of something greater." Mark glared. "I'd settle for walking without shaking." They both stared at his hands, which no longer bore scars from old injuries. Even his childhood dog bite, once a crescent-shaped mark on his forearm, was gone. For the first time, Mark looked afraid. Not because he had nearly died, but because he hadn't. The first day of full consciousness was the worst. Mark had always thought of pain as a steady thing, sharp, dull, hot, cold. But this was something else. It felt like his bones were growing in reverse and fast forward at the same time. His skin itched from within, not on the surface, but deep, marrow level, and when he tried to stand without assistance, his leg buckled, not because it was broken anymore, but because the muscles were rebuilding faster than they could stabilize. The medics had cleared a small space near the cradle so he could attempt short movement trials. They'd made a game out of it. Halleck held up colored vials across the room, challenging him to walk to them. Mark made it 5 steps before vomiting. "Your equilibrium's being rewritten," Kalen said clinically, scanning him for neural lag. The nanofluid is improving proprioception before your vestibular system can adapt. It's like installing new software on outdated hardware. Mark sat back down, shaking, wiping bile from his lip. Feels more like trying to read a book during an earthquake. Despite the setbacks, he improved faster than anyone expected. Within 72 hours, he could walk unassisted. By the 5th day, he climbed the spiral scaffold up to the diagnostics platform. The crew watched like he was a walking miracle. But Mark felt far from one. He couldn't sleep, not really. When he closed his eyes, his mind swam with fragmented memories, some his own, others he swore weren't. Patterns, schematics, lights he couldn't interpret pulsed behind his eyelids. He'd described it once to Kalen as dreaming in someone else's code. Then the itching started again, this time at the base of his spine. "What's back there?" Mark asked one morning. Shirt lifted, eyes locked on Kalen's neutral expression. Kalen hesitated, pulling up a scan. "That is new. You're developing auxiliary nerve extensions. They resemble synthetic control relays, but they're grown from your own tissue." Mark's face went blank. "So, I'm growing ports." "Not ports, interfaces. Your body is adapting to communicate with artificial systems, without hardware." By the end of the first week, it wasn't just healing anymore. It was transformation. The outpost converted Biolab 3 into a full-time observation suite. Kalen implemented rotating shifts. Halleck stopped calling him the human and started using just his name. And Mark, against all expectations, began assisting in his own diagnostics. Because somehow he understood the data. "Look," he said during one late-night session, pointing at a readout that had baffled 2 Mira neurologists. "This isn't noise. It's redundancy looping. The nanofluid's copying my neural commands before I even think them." Kalen blinked. "That's predictive cognition. You're saying the fluid is anticipating your intent?" Mark nodded. "Not just that. It's rerouting damage control faster than pain can register. Like if I cut myself now, it wouldn't just heal, it would stop hurting before I even realize I'm hurt." Halleck tested it. A thin scalpel along Mark's forearm. The skin parted, then sealed again with barely a mark. No blood, no flinch. Mark didn't blink. By the 10th day, Central Directorate on Gentar 4 demanded a formal presentation. Kalen protested. "He's still recovering. His system is stabilizing, but far from plateaued." Mark interjected. "I'm standing, breathing, not dying. That's enough." So they went. The presentation chamber on Gentar 4 was a ring of obsidian glass and violet biolights, suspended a kilometer above the city in an orbital cradle. Delegates from 4 systems watched from their respective partitions. Mark stood center stage, clothed in adaptive mesh to hide the scarless skin and growing web of subdermal traces across his arms and back. When he flexed, the silver lines shimmered faintly under his skin-living pathways, not ink. "I'm not here because I wanted to be," he began, steady voice echoing in perfect acoustics. "I was part of a test team. There was an accident. I got hurt. Badly." He paused. "You saved me by breaking every protocol, and somehow it worked." He held up his hand and sliced it on a sterilized blade provided for demonstration. Again, the wound sealed in seconds. The room was silent. "This isn't just healing, it's not a miracle, it's chemistry, engineering, biology, and something else we don't fully get yet." Callan stepped forward. "We've isolated the adaptive mechanism. The nanofluid did not just repair it, integrated. We believe his genetic structure now includes nanofluid-coded repair loops. They replicate independently. They cannot be removed." A delegate raised a tendril. "Can it be replicated in others?" "We tried. Non-human tissue rejected it completely. Even cloned human tissue failed. The fluid integrates only with a living host and only, so far, with Mark." The delegation buzzed in hushed tones. Some were excited, others suspicious. Beneath the thick layers of ice? "Why him?" someone asked. Kalen hesitated. "Unknown. His injuries were severe enough that his blood was nearly gone when the fluid was introduced. Perhaps that total saturation enabled a full bind. Another delegate interrupted, or perhaps his human biology is uniquely compatible. That would have implications. Mark stiffened. I'm not a test tube. I didn't sign up for this. Kalen looked at him. You've already changed medical science forever, whether you wanted to or not. The next few weeks blurred. Mark's body continued adapting. He stopped getting tired. Not entirely, he still needed sleep, but not much. Wounds healed instantly. His digestion improved. His vision became sharper. The subdermal filaments connected with local tech without him needing interface gloves. One time, the lights in the lab dimmed just because he got annoyed. The transformation wasn't just internal anymore. But none of it came without cost. He started getting headaches. Not minor ones, migraines that dropped him to his knees. His senses would overload when too many signals passed through him. Once, when a technician scanned him without warning, the feedback knocked the man unconscious and gave Mark temporary amnesia for 6 minutes. Your system's overclocked, Kalen said, injecting him with a sedative. It's not just adapting, it's amplifying. Too fast, Mark whispered, curled on the diagnostic bed. I'm not ready for this. They gave him more sedation, tethered his vitals to 3 backup cores, set alarms to detect neural surges. But there was no manual for what he'd become, only guesses. One night, long after most of the outpost had gone dim, Halleck found Mark sitting alone on the observation deck, eyes fixed on the stars. You okay? The Merge asked softly. Mark didn't answer right away. Then, I don't know who I am anymore. Halleck sat beside him. You're still Mark. I don't bleed. I don't scar. I connect with machines without touching them. I don't even dream like I used to. I feel like I'm watching myself become someone else. You're still human, Halleck said. Mark shook his head. No, I'm something close, but not the same. Neither spoke for a while. Then Halleck said quietly, maybe being human isn't what you're made of. Maybe it's what you choose to hold on to. Mark didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. Behind them, the biomonitors kept ticking, and in the marrow of his bones, the nanofluid kept working, repairing, changing, preparing. By the 3rd week, the transformation was no longer private. Word had spread. Across the research colonies, medical forums buzzed with encrypted footage. A human with no external augmentations reknitting fractured limbs in under a minute. A bloodless incision healing mid-procedure. Vital scans showing systemic regeneration cycles operating at near zero latency. Mark hadn't left the outpost since the demonstration on Gentar 4. He could barely manage the short walk from his quarters to the observation deck without drawing attention, not because he was frail, he was stronger now than he'd ever been, but because every step felt watched, measured. Even breathing under scrutiny became exhausting. Kalen noticed first. You're becoming hyper-aware. Your cortices are operating at enhanced vigilance. Mark rubbed his temples. I hear machines when they boot up 2 levels below. I can tell when someone's heartbeat changes in the next corridor. I'm not resting, I'm buffering. We can suppress the hyperactivity, Kalen offered. And then what? Delay it for a day? I'm tired of patching what can't be paused. The worst was when the headaches returned. No warning, just whiteout pain. Sometimes his vision would fragment into digital overlays, schematics, trajectories, command prompts before vanishing again. And still, he insisted on helping in the lab. Kalen let him, but only under observation. Mark sat beside a data core on the 12th day of enhanced cognitive flare. He glanced at a recursive gene sequence loop the team had been struggling with for weeks. That's wrong, he said. The recursion's tangled. Reframe the stem chain 4 notches back and phase align with the tertiary pattern. They did. The results unlocked 4 new compatibility markers with biosynthetic alloys. It should have taken a month. He wasn't just healing. He was thinking faster, deeper, beyond what the nanofluid's capabilities suggested. You're not adapting to the fluid anymore, Kalen said later. It's adapting to you. But then the lab accident happened. Routine calibration, a minor power cycle on a tissue accelerator rig. Mark was calibrating the interface relay when the adjacent panel surged, unknown interference. Maybe from him. The containment seal failed. A jet of superheated plasma burst through the opening, slicing across his chest and shoulder. He screamed. Not from the injury, it barely registered, but from what came after. Because this time, it didn't heal right away. The wound closed. That part worked. But the skin under it throbbed like it was swelling inward. Something felt off. Callan rushed him back to the cradle. Diagnostic arms scanned him for anomalies. It's not healing, it's modifying. Mark winced, chest bare, breath ragged. Modifying what? Your tissue. It's thicker, structurally denser. Your dermal layer now has filamentous mesh forming inside it. The fluid isn't just repairing, it's reinforcing. For what? Mark asked. Callan didn't answer. A day later, it happened again. A tool malfunctioned, jolting his hand with an energy pulse. His skin didn't just absorb the shock, it redirected it, rerouting the current across his arm and discharging it harmlessly at the elbow. Mark stared at his hand like it belonged to someone else. What am I turning into? Callan looked him straight in the eye. You're becoming the first biological system to survive long-term nanofluid infusion. And now it's pushing beyond survival. It's pushing toward permanence. By the fourth week, the medical council from the Galactic Research Union arrived. They came with high-polished implants, orbital credentials, and a disturbing amount of curiosity. Mark met them in the sterilization chamber. 3 of them stood behind a reinforced partition. 2 more circled him with scan orbs. The lead director asked the question no one else had dared. Can you be injured at all? Mark hesitated, then took a scalpel from the tray and drove it into his thigh. The council gasped. He removed it. The wound bled for 3 seconds, then sealed. Within a minute, the skin looked untouched. The director scribbled something. Has your pain threshold changed? Mark nodded. I still feel it, but less like pain and more like data. Another director spoke. Has your emotional state changed? That one caught him off guard. Yes, he admitted. I get irritated faster. My attention jumps. Sometimes I feel disconnected, like I'm watching myself through a screen. The group exchanged glances. Callan stepped in. He's not unstable, but his brain is processing stimuli at speeds we don't fully understand. The nanofluid appears to favor neural efficiency over emotional filtering. The director nodded. You've become proof of concept, a hybrid biology that turns trauma into advancement. Mark's jaw tightened. I didn't ask to be an experiment. No one does. But your existence will change treatment protocols across 20 systems. You're the first of something that might not be replicable. That makes you invaluable. He left the meeting shaken. Not from what they said, but from how they said it. Like he wasn't a man anymore, just a model. The breaking point came a week later, during a simple experiment. Mark was testing reaction calibration with halide light pulses on a screen, reading speed and trajectory. Mid-session, Mark seized, his vision fractured again. Numbers spiraled across the floor. His ears rang like a fire alarm tuned to another dimension. When he woke, his arms were fused, with the console filaments extending from his wrists into the system like organic cables. Halleck had pulled the emergency stop and called Callan. Mark lay on the medical slab afterward, breathing hard, arms still twitching with residual sync. I didn't try to link, he said weakly. It just happened. The nanofluid is crossing thresholds, Callan said, disturbed. Voluntary control is diminishing. It's starting to overwrite your autonomic functions. So what now? We limit stimuli, reduce contact with interfaces, monitor for signs of deeper integration. And if it doesn't stop? Callan didn't answer. That night, Mark locked the door to his quarters for the first time. He stared at his hands under dim light. They no longer looked like his. The tendons were subtly reshaped, The veins shimmered faintly beneath the skin like circuitry. He touched his chest, where the plasma burn had been. The flesh was solid armored, almost. He tapped into his personal terminal, intending to journal something, anything, but the screen blinked on before he touched it. His thought had activated the system, and for the first time the words typed themselves before he even decided what to say. He yanked the power plug. Something deep inside his gut twisted. Not pain, exactly, but a knowing, like the fluid wasn't just in his blood anymore. It had learned him, and it wasn't done. The final phase didn't begin with an event. It began with silence. Mark woke one morning and realized the noise was gone. No buzz of diagnostics from adjacent labs, no hum of magnetic containment from the reactor 2 floors below, no heartbeat from the medic who always passed his door during shift rotation. Just silence. At first, he thought it was an equipment failure. He sat up slowly, checking the biometric monitor on his wrist. Functional, ambient readings within range. Then he stood, walked to the door, and stepped out into the corridor. Everyone was there, moving, talking. The outpost operated as usual, but he didn't hear it. He didn't hear anything. Kalen found him minutes later, sitting on the floor just outside the hydroponics bay, hands clutched around his ears. "You can't hear?" Mark nodded. "It's not that everything's gone. It's just filtered. Like, I'm not supposed to hear it anymore." Kalen scanned him on the spot. The neural feedback loop was stable. Synaptic response time normal. No degradation. But something had changed. "The fluid's begun isolating your sensory input," Kalen said. "Tuning out non-essential data. You're not losing function. You're being prioritized." Mark exhaled slowly. "I didn't ask to be optimized." 3 days later, the final test was proposed. Not by Colin, not by the outpost, by Mark himself. He requested exposure to a lethal pathogen, one previously known to neutralize regenerative systems. Not out of recklessness, but out of certainty. "If it still affects me," he explained, "then this has limits. If not, then we need to accept the reality." Kalen tried to object. Mark overruled him. "I need to know if I'm still treatable," he said, "or if I've become something permanent." The trial was controlled. Pathogen class, H37, known for rapid pulmonary necrosis in organic tissue. It was administered in a sealed med pod with full containment. Mark sat calmly as the mist entered the chamber. He coughed once, then waited. Kalen monitored everything: white blood cell counts, oxygenation, metabolic stress. Nothing dipped, not even by a fraction. The pathogen was neutralized mid-introduction. It never reached tissue level. The nanofluid didn't just defend, it preempted. Within 15 minutes, the chamber was cleared. Mark stepped out, blinking at the brightness. "So," he said, "now we know." Kalen nodded, his expression unreadable. "You are now biologically incompatible with death," he said. Mark laughed once, dry. That's one way to put it. The Galactic Research Union sent their final decision 4 days later. Mark would not be studied further. He would not be replicated. And he would not be kept. Instead, they offered him choice. He could remain on Atraxis 7, under observation, but free. Or he could leave. Not just the outpost, but the entire medical network. Travel where he wanted, isolated, monitored remotely. Protected, but separate. He read the statement twice. Then he folded it and didn't respond. He visited Halleck that night in the rec chamber, where the Mirai was calibrating relaxation spheres for meditation. "They're scared of you," Halleck said gently, not looking up. "I don't blame them," Mark replied. "I barely trust myself anymore." "You're not a weapon." "No. But I'm also not just a man. I haven't been for weeks." Halleck paused. "So, what are you going to do?" Mark watched the artificial stars on the chamber's ceiling for a long time. Something human. The farewell came a week later. Mark stepped aboard the outpost's long-range shuttle, wearing a sealed excursion suit modified to suppress most passive emissions from his altered systems. The crew didn't touch him, not out of fear but reverence, like he'd become a myth with a pulse. He turned one last time to look at Kalen and Halleck. "You saved my life," he said. Kalen gave a slow nod. "And you changed ours." Alik stepped forward and handed him a small device, a personal projection crystal. "It shows stars," the Myron said. "Any system you want, just in case you forget where you came from." Mark took it carefully. Then the hatch closed. The engines fired. And he was gone. Years passed. Reports surfaced across fringe sectors of a lone traveler aiding wounded colonists, a freighter crew who suffered a catastrophic core breach but somehow survived after a stranger restructured their ship's systems mid-crash. A plague-ravaged outpost reporting a man who walked through biohazard zones untouched, curing not through medicine but presence. Never confirmed. Always quiet. Mark never gave interviews. He didn't record journals. But once, in a trade post orbiting Central V, a station worker found a small device left on a table. It was the projection crystal Halik had given him. When activated, it showed a map, not of stars, but of people. All the lives Mark had touched since leaving Ditraxis 7, and pulsed with light. And it kept growing. He was still out there. Not invincible. Not immortal. Just healing whatever he could, whomever he could. Because for all that he had become, the one thing that never changed was what mattered most. He was still human, and that, in the end, was enough.